Welcome to the Get Out In It podcast, keeping our mental and physical well-being balanced by heading out into nature and doing stuff.
The activity isn't important. Walk, run, hike, bike, whatever it is, just find something you enjoy and get out in it. The point of this podcast is to show how ordinary people can achieve extraordinary levels of health and fitness.
Out here, we'll share informal, inclusive advice for anyone trying to improve their mental and physical well-being, based on our own experiences and professional knowledge from our special guests.
So let's lace up and get out in it.
And here we are. Welcome to episode 3. What a week it has been. How are you, Maria Herring?
I cannot lie today, James Bale. I am really epic.
Really epic. I'm a bit sore.
Really?
Yeah, just a little bit sore.
I think we're going to find out a little bit later why you're sore.
Let's go down that rabbit hole.
Let's do it. Got out in it.
So, Maria Herring, this week, how have you got out in it?
Wow. I had some excellent getting out in it this week. At the beginning of the week, it was minimal getting out in it because it's a taper week. And the taper week was leading up to today, which was big race day. It was the
Bristol Half Marathon.
The Bristol Half Marathon.
And how did it go?
It went pretty well.
Yeah, so you basically, to fill everyone in, Maria last year ran the Bristol Half Marathon in 2:02.
2:02.
Yeah, and so this year you were looking for your first ever road PB of sub 2.
I wanted a sub 2.
Did you achieve this?
I was feeling really nervous at the start of the race. I had managed to somehow convince myself that I wasn't going to make it. I really wished I hadn't told all the people that I told that I wanted to do a sub 2. But then I ran a sub 2.
And was that because of the excellent pacing you had from your excellent pacer throughout the race?
It's a long list of things. It's the excellent training I had from an excellent coach. And then an excellent pacer that I had on the duration of the course who kept me running at pace for the entire race. And I managed to do it in 1:57:28.
And it was a pleasure to see you do it. I loved pulling back at the end of the race and watching you cross the finish line in front of me with a big fat smile on your face that I couldn't see because you were facing the wrong way, but I gave you a cheer and it was a hell of an achievement, so well done.
Thank you. It was quite something. I'm low-key super proud of myself. I've pulled it out of the hat and I was really chuffed. I did think though, just as I was crossing the finish line, I clocked somebody who was throwing up. And so the first thing I wanted to do just after I crossed the finish line and paused my Garmin was I wanted to throw up. Because the last 200 metres at the Bristol, it's such a wicked event. It's so well organised, this Bristol Half Marathon. And on the last, all the way around, you've got, mile signs saying how long you've got to go. But then on that last 1K, you've got like 100-metre countdowns. And so when I saw the 200-metre countdown, you said to me, go on. And so I dug deep.
You did dig deep.
I dug deep and I sprinted as fast as I could. And that's what made me want to puke when I crossed the finish line because I went really quick.
So I was very impressed.
Thanks very much.
Very proud of you as my favourite coachee.
Thank you very much.
Unfortunately for me though, I was here to pace Maria, so I ran a comfortable 5:25 to 5:30 pace the whole race.
Comfortable for you.
Comfortable for me. But unfortunately 5K from the finish, my hip flexor just went bang. I finished the race with Maria to help her through it, but at the moment I can't walk very well. I can't put any weight down through my right leg. My hip flexor has completely shat the bed.
So once again, you have sustained an injury, and my tiny little indestructible body has passed through the entire ordeal fully unscathed.
I've never had an injury this bad before.
Really?
I've never felt quite this in pain. I ran that last 5K. I had white hot shoots of pain going up through my right hand side of my body.
That sounds rubbish.
Now I genuinely can't put any weight on my right leg. And so I'm just I'm sucking down a glass of white wine and thinking about hoping it'll be better tomorrow.
Yeah. Well, last 5K for me, all I was thinking about was all the bags of crisps I had in my rucksack, waiting in the luggage section. I was so hungry.
So I reckon what we should do is go for a walk, go for a hike. The idea of going for a hike right now is not ideal for me, but we should go for a hike. with my good friend David Tilbury-Davis, who is a coach of, as you'll hear, a coach of many, very many elite athletes, and see what he's got to say about how best to avoid injuries like this.
Let's go and have a hike and a chat with DTD.
Getting into it. So this week, we are lucky enough to be joined by David Tilbury-Davis, who is a coach in the world of endurance sports. He's been coaching professional and age group athletes since 1995. He has worked with Olympic, Commonwealth, World Championship level athletes across triathlon, mountain biking, and cycling. And he has represented his country in sports, taught undergraduate autonomy and physiology, and coach education. David, thanks for coming on. How are you, mate?
Pleasure to be here. Yeah, good, thanks. Enjoying what we call Finnish summer. So it's 10 degrees and everybody's walking around in a summer dress and t-shirts and shorts.
Sounds good. So the first question that I want to ask you this week, David, is what have you done to get out in it?
I actually was away for work and was running to the venue every day. So admittedly, that wasn't so much fun alongside American main roads with no footpaths, but At least there was a grass verge and a nice breakfast awaiting me when I got there. So.
Yeah, they don't do footpaths very well, or separation of traffic and pedestrians very well over there, do they?
Yeah, not so much.
So where were you specifically?
I was in just a place just outside Marietta in Georgia.
Oh, cool. Bet it was hot.
Nice.
I bet it was hot over there, wasn't it, this time of year?
Yeah, it's about 20 degrees and a little humid.
Okay.
And a bit windy. So
that's not too bad.
Not too bad.
This time last year, James and I were in St. George in Utah,
Yep.
and it was boiling. It was boiling and dry, and it was really hard to run. So 20 degrees and humid sounds all right.
No, it wasn't too bad.
So welcome to the Get Out in It podcast. We're here to talk about movement and exercise and all things active. So how important, as a coach of professional and age group level athletes, how important do you think exercise is as part of the human experience?
I think it's hugely important. I think we live in a day and age where societally we've evolved to a point where we're very sedentary, and that's not a criticism of people. It's just the nature of work and commuting. Interestingly, I've seen like one of those little memes of sort of activity levels, and it was like a sociology study, and it showed like just some arbitrary town, and it said this is the sort of the circumference of the area that your grandparents played in, and that circumference was sort of 15 miles. And then it was sort of like, this is the circumference that your parents played in, and that was sort of like 7-8 miles. And then the next one was like, and this is sort of your generation, and it was like 1 to 2 miles. And I think that's interesting, is that, that's a sort of a societal issue that we have, where work and work hours impacts on people's ability to move day to day. And certainly, although I work with professional athletes in the context of health and well-being, I always talk to them about the importance of not just doing aerobic exercise, but also doing sort of strength and conditioning and body weight and just different things, because I use this phrase of kind of you want grandma or grandpa strength, which is where
farmer
your partner
strength
says, oh, can you just you're 75 years old, and your partner says, can you just move that big rock from that corner of the garden to that corner of the garden? And you just walk over, pick it up, move it, put it down, and there's no issues or niggles in doing that. It's second nature. And I think that's what all of us should strive for, is this ability to be sort of functionally bulletproof into the later stages of our life.
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly not just focusing on moving in one direction, like a runner or a cyclist or a swimmer, but be able to move, sideways as well, and have the supporting muscles and tendons and capacity to do that. So in relation to the importance of exercise, how important do you think getting outside and spending time outside is?
I think it's hugely important. I mean, a lot of people unfortunately don't have access to necessarily green belt, and the sort of development of built up areas makes this harder and harder. It varies country to country, but I think we even have the phrase greenwashing now, or that sort of implies getting outdoors in nature in the midst of a working day. And that's well documented to be beneficial from a mental well-being perspective. And so if you have the ability to do that, it's great. I'm certainly extremely fortunate living here in sort of Helsinki, Finland, where the city invests in sort of outdoor gym machines. And they have genuinely just built one about 400 meters from my house, which has 12 different like exercise machines, from sort of leg press to bicep curl, all with adjustable weights that are all outdoors, completely outdoors, and just free to use. And it's literally just on the way to kindergarten for me. So I can take the little one, cycle back, stop, do a workout, ride home. And I think when you have a culture and a society that sort of supports that and enables it, I think you really should take advantage of it.
That sounds brilliant, because I struggle with strength training. I have to do it because I know it improves my general fitness and my ability to run long races. But the strength training I do is indoors, and I hate it. So the idea of having all of those machines and all of that equipment outdoors on the way to somewhere, that sounds genius.
Yeah, well, I'm very fortunate. They literally finished it about 2 weeks ago, and I said to my wife, well, I don't ever need to pay for a gym membership now.
Brilliant.
So, yeah.
So you coach others, you coach high-performing others whose job it is to succeed. You're a busy man. Yes. You've got a lot happening. You travel a lot. What do you do to fit exercise and movement into your life?
I have 2 very young children. So as anybody out there listening who has very young children would say, it's that stage where you're in the trenches. So, my wife and I try and find time through the day to fit in 15, 20 minutes of our own ability to exercise. Some days for me, I have a lot of international clients. So sometimes I have to be making phone calls at 9, 10 p.m. at night. And so I'll go for a walk outside in the forest for a brisk walk and stroll around the forest whilst I'm speaking to somebody in Utah or in Vancouver, or Seattle. So
that's nice, fitting in your activity with work, kind of like habit stacking and doing several things.
I think for a period of time I got very hung up on, like, I need to be in front. I mean, there are occasions that I need to be in front of my computer looking at data or looking at video and discussing it and giving them feedback. But a lot of the time, the way that I work with my athletes is just getting an understanding of how they're feeling, how they're coping with the training, what are their concerns, what are their desires, what are they looking forward to, what are they apprehensive about. And I don't necessarily need to be staring at a computer to do that. I can look at stuff on my phone whilst I'm walking and talking as well. But so that's how I drive that communication and empathy, is being outdoors rather than being indoors. And half of them find it amusing that I can go for a walk outdoors at 10 o'clock at night and it be like 1 o'clock in the afternoon in London at this time of year here.
So I know I've got a feeling I know what 2 answers to this question, 2 tiny little answers to this question might be. But what barriers in your life make it hard for you to find times to exercise?
I think for a lot of people, the barriers to exercise, myself included, are sort of expectation of what you should be doing. Always be grinding, and I think there's this sort of polarized state at the moment where you see sort of fitness influencers and such, talking about sort of rise and grind, get up at 4:30 in the morning and do your workout, and I just and myself and more sage strength and conditioning experts I know sort of laugh at that and say, A, those people don't have family or kids, and B, it's not a reality. You need to get a good night's sleep, and then maybe you have to leverage work situations that you have. So I've worked with people that work in the city in London that work long hours, have long commutes, and we've made a decision that the best thing they could do is not use elevators. the entire day when they're in these big corporate buildings, that they use the stairs. And it can be something as simple as that. And I think we get hung up on, we have to be going for a run, or we have to be riding a bike, or we have to be at a swimming pool, we have to be lifting weights. And you don't. You could be making phone calls on a brisk walk. You could be not using an elevator as a rule of thumb in your life when you're working in big corporate buildings. You could be getting on the bus at a different stop, so you have to walk a bit more, and that means you maybe need to get up a little bit earlier, but that's not so bad. So it's finding those opportunities to be a little more active rather than getting too hung up on, I've got to do a workout. I've got to get the turbo trainer out and set the bike up and do a workout. And it's like, not necessarily.
Okay, so with that in mind, do you think it behooves somebody like me, who's a relative newbie to health and fitness and running in particular, do you think it behooves somebody like me to get a coach, or can I just do stuff on my own?
I think the answer is it depends. If your personality is such that you want accountability and you don't like to have to think about what you're going to do and you like structure, then potentially having a coach may be beneficial. I coach athletes and I coach coaches that are athletes. So that's one aspect of it. But likewise, if you're sort of more of a free spirit or sort of ethereal individual, and you just sort of wake up and you're like, I feel like doing this today, then actually that's just as good approach. Because when you're trying to be active and healthy, the reality is success is being active and healthy. It is not, defined by doing this amount of kilometers of running in a week, or running at this pace, or riding at that power. Because the reality is you're not training enough to be optimizing your ability to perform. You're training enough just to be healthy. So then, as long as it's varied and fun and enjoyable, it doesn't really matter what you do.
Yeah, because if you pile on unrealistic expectations onto yourself, you're just adding stress, and then you start suffering from the detriment of decision fatigue and just stuff, not doing what you said you're going to do in the first place, which was move more.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you think with the world as it is now, heavy social media usage and abundance of contrasting voices online, do you think it's become harder for people wanting to take their first steps towards a healthier and more active lifestyle and know which direction to go in?
Oh, 100%. Because also all of these social media platforms are algorithmically driven. So if you decide to, you think about, I want to do some exercises at home, so I'm going to just look something up on YouTube, and you pick a particular sort of theme, then suddenly every time you look on YouTube, you're going to get thematically the same things. And so there's a risk that you may end up, not having a good, for want of a better phrase, bullshit filter, and suddenly doing things which aren't really wise for one to do as an individual, because it doesn't suit your context or your situation, or you don't have the right equipment, and that can create pressure. Have you got the right equipment? I think there's a lot of things that people don't realize they can do, with a very simple equipment, or even just their body weight, and still be, healthy and active. Yes, is the answer. I think there's a trap that can be fallen into.
How would you suggest navigating that landscape? If you're someone who doesn't, I mean, you coach people. I'm tapped into I coach, and I'm tapped into the world of exercise and nutrition and health. If someone out there is just Googling for the first time, how do they go about navigating that landscape and sort of cutting out some of the more unnecessary noise?
Well, I can only suggest what is how I would approach it. And I would simply, if I was looking for some information, I would try to find information that's presented by people that look normal and look like me, than, some 22-year-old chiseled abs personal trainer that's a bundle of energy. Because I think that's where you might, all things considered, get a more realistic answer of an approach to take. And then also just try and find maybe like-minded individuals through some social media platforms or groups that maybe have similar interests in what you're aspiring to do. So, in the UK, there are lots of park run events. I think that's a great opportunity for people to get active, at the weekends if you have one near yourself. And I don't think any of those are performance orientated, although some people do run quite fast at them. But it's about sort of community gathering. And I think that's something that we've lost sight of societally, is doing things as a community or supporting each other as a community.
I think that's why I like running, because first of all, there wasn't a high need for specialized equipment. I just needed a pair of trainers and I could go out on the trails. And then also, the longer I started doing it, the more I realized there's actually a really lovely trail community of runners where I live here in France. And so I've got the best of both worlds. I can do a solitary run if I want to, but if I want to do a more social thing, I can join a group, and it's really nice.
Having that flexibility is key, because the more restricted we get in our ability to do things. I mean, just an example like myself, we don't have an abundance of home gym equipment, and I like doing some gym exercises. So then, until this outdoor facility was finished a few weeks ago, there was much more basic sort of things in the woods, like a chin-up bar and some logs to lift, and a sit-up bench. And then otherwise it's paying a membership at a gym, and then I've got to get to the gym. And so, those barriers to entry, the more you can take those barriers down, the better.
What do you think the biggest perceived barriers are for people?
Logistics of traveling to and from whatever it is they want to do, and money. The cost of doing those things.
I think that was a big thing for me as well, because running is free. Don't have to pay for that.
Yeah. And you don't, and the reality is, I'm known as a coach that can be quite quantitative, but the reality is when you look at the science on understanding physiology, there's a very famous piece of work by a chap called Carl Foster, where he talked about what's called the torque test. And the premise of it was they were trying to work out how to prescribe fitness to cardiac rehab patients from a training perspective. And so, of course, you can't do a VO2 max test on a cardiac rehab patient because you'll kill them. So they took healthy subjects and, they looked at various measures of, exercise intensity, like lactate and how much oxygen they were breathing in. And they did a ramp test with them, and they looked at their ability to talk. Now, it was in the US, so they used the Pledge of Allegiance. So I pledge allegiance to the flag, blah, 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 blah. When I've written about this in the past, the Pledge of Allegiance, if I remember correctly, is about 30 words. Bar, bar, black sheep, have you any wool? The nursery rhyme is about 28 words. So I've talked about using something like that under the same basis. So what they found was, if you can sort of talk comfortably, say the Pledge of Allegiance, if you're American, or something like Bar Bar Black Sheep, if you can recite that comfortably without desperate pauses for breath, or sort of sucking air in every sort of fifth word, then you're pretty much aerobic. You're below what's called ventilatory threshold 1 or lactate threshold 1, or whatever semantic debate you want to have about thresholds. And then once you start pausing for breath, you're into that sort of in between thresholds. And then once you get to the point that you can't talk, then you're at anaerobic threshold, VT2, LT2, all those kind of sciencey terms. But the reality is that for us, our ability to talk sort of comfortably, can't talk, those 2 points, that's all you really need to know from an exercising perspective when you're thinking about exercising aerobically, biking or running, is can you do those things? You don't need a heart rate monitor. You don't need a Garmin computer. So the barriers to entry can get lower when people understand that there's ways of calibrating their exercise intensity that just rely on their ability to talk.
Do you think the industry has created an ecosystem with the huge push to sell gadgets and things you need, an ecosystem that in itself is creating more fear of exercise, because people start to think, well, I can't do that because I haven't got the Garmin, I haven't got the heart rate monitor, I don't know how Strava works.
Of course, absolutely. Even though I use all sorts of analytical methods of looking at training, assessing wellness in my athletes, the most important thing is still, when I talk to my athletes, is asking them, how do you feel? That's the most important thing. So the more the people that are trying to be healthy and active can maybe just sit down in the morning and for 5 minutes or 10 minutes just journal and write down some things that they're grateful for in their life. And on a scale of 1 to 5, how sore do they feel? How energetic do they feel? Then over time, that can give you a very clear indication of your mental health and sort of how you're coping with the exercise that you're choosing to do.
I think that's the thing, isn't it? Because we've kind of forgotten these days how to listen to our physical body, but also our mental health as well. We don't know how to listen to ourselves anymore.
Says the person who can't tell me whether she had a good night's sleep or not without
I have to look at my Garmin to know if I've slept well.
But I think that's an interesting thing, as I think the human body is very good at inuring itself to stress. And if there's listeners out there that have had young kids that don't sleep well, they'll know that there's days when they know for a fact that they haven't really slept very long in the context of time, hours, but they don't feel so smashed. And that's because if you actually look at some of the science, that's because actually, even though they've not slept very long, the bits where they did sleep, their bodies managed to get some good deep sleep. And then there might be other days where they've maybe slept longer and yet for some reason not had much good deep sleep. And so they wake up feeling much more exhausted. So I think the human body is very good at sort of inuring itself to stress. And I think there is a huge risk with a lot of these quantified self devices of creating anxiety and creating pressure and expectation, when in reality, probably the best thing you could do is, unless there's a reason that you're trying to measure something, the best thing you could do is just turn that function off or take it off and put it in the drawer.
Because your Garmin can tell you whether you've been productive or not, whether you're maintaining, and that can break your spirit just by looking at that.
And I think that's the thing, is that people, when they have these things, they think that it's some sentient device that understands their body perfectly, and the reality is it doesn't. It doesn't understand enough. It doesn't have enough context that actually, when it says you need 68 hours to recover, that's not true.
I am so guilty of listening to everything my Garmin says. I feel like she's like this omniscient being who knows everything about me and my psyche. And so if my Garmin tells me I'm doing something wrong, or if I've dropped a point in my my VO2 max, it's like, oh, and it's the end of the world. It's literally the end of the world for me.
Yeah.
And then JB has to talk me down.
But that's where, a diary and a pencil might be a better investment.
Yeah.
For 9, for 9 out of 10 people.
So let's dial into the journey. So someone comes to you, let's say they're over 40 years old. They haven't done much exercise for a long time, maybe since they were in their teens, and they want to start moving again. Obviously, everybody's specific needs are individual, but where do you start, and what questions are you going to ask them to be able to sort of get them moving and get the answers from them you need as a coach?
I think my first question would be, is what are they looking for from a coach? Is, are they coming into the working relationship with an understanding specifically of what they need, and also around how they need that. So why do you need a coach? How do you want to engage with the coach, and what is it you want the coach to do for you? So why, how, what type thing. And once I have good answers on that, it helps me gauge whether I'm a good fit, or maybe they need to take a different approach. Maybe they just need to invest in a basic online training plan. But then once those questions have been answered, let's say they've been answered in a sort of efficacious manner, then it becomes a case of understanding their context. So what are their circumstances? What logistically, how much home gym equipment do they have? Are they near a gym? Do they have access to one? Do they have access to, nature close by? Is that something that they want to do? What are the aspects of activity, of being active, that they're most excited about doing, and what are they least excited about doing? So sort of like a SWOT analysis of, sort of what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses, what are the opportunities, and what are the threats, to becoming more active. And once I have that understanding, then sort of the final thing might be looking at like a week's timetable. And something that I do is get people to fill out a week timetable with, where's shade in all the areas where you're working, or, feeding the kids, doing housework, going to church, just shade all of that in. And then on another one, shade in when you think you can exercise. And typically, if you add those two timetables together, they invariably add up to more than 168 hours in a week. So that's where you then have to sort of go back to the people and say, okay, let's manage expectations, because maybe what you think you can do is not a reality. Or it might be that you can say, well, do you think there's ways of leveraging your circumstances? Like I said, like this guy that was a trader in the city, and he was like, I leave the house at 5 a.m. on the train, on the underground. I'm at the office until 10 p.m. and then I'm getting to bed at 1 a.m. So I said, Monday to Friday, no elevators. That was it. That was all he could fit in. That's not sustainable in the long term. You should be able to be more active than that. But there's always the opportunity to create complementarity rather than compromise. People always think it's a trade-off between, their family, their work, their community, and their own personal sort of desires and hobbies. And it shouldn't be a trade-off. You should be able to create some complementarity between those things. So do you, for instance, at the weekend, go and visit elderly parents with the kids? Yes. Okay, fine. So can, one of you sort of leave the house a bit earlier and cycle half of the journey and then get picked up on the way? So just creating these opportunities of complementarity in our circumstances.
So at the other end of the spectrum of that, as a couple of years ago, 2021, I went from running a 5K to a 55K ultra in 3 months. Was that a silly thing for a noob to do?
Again, it depends. On face value, one might say yes. But again, it comes down to, what's your activity level history like? Are you robust? Are you injury prone? So are you, clinically obese? Because, and I don't mean that in a fattest way, I mean it in the, basic physics. There's a risk of load and injury and neuromuscular fatigue that could imply that, it's more likely to roll an ankle or something like that. So, assuming one is a healthy individual, that's probably a slightly crazy thing to do, but it's not undoable. And also, it comes down to sort of expectation. When I'm coaching people to do Ironmans, some people before a race have to do a long run. Like they have to do several 20-mile runs. And other people are quite happy with a couple of times of a long run of 2 hours, and they don't care about the distance. But the same with the bike. Some people are like, I have to ride for my own mental well-being. I have to ride 112 miles. Then I know I can do it, and we don't need to do that again. And other people are like, I don't really care. I'm fine. I'll know I can do it. Me personally, when I did ultras, I was very much like, if I can go run for 4 to 5 hours in the mountains in Spain, where we lived at the time, then I'm not really fussed about being on my feet and moving for 10, 12, 20 hours.
In terms of building a fitter body and resilience to injury and making the journey sustainable, what's important? Cardio, strength, diet.
Think about it like a table. Cardio, strength, diet, sleep. Those are the legs to the table. All of those legs need to be functional. How you do those things, I'm not being facile, but carrying a baby or constantly picking a child up off the ground, tidying, toys up, vacuuming, those are somewhat dynamic movement. You don't want to get too hung up on you have to be doing things with weights. Or, gardening can be strenuous for some people. And so you want to understand what can you do given your circumstances? What do you enjoy doing? But all four of those things are important. I wouldn't say one is more important than the other in the long term of health and well-being.
I love that analogy. Legs of a table. I can see that. I can visualize it. That's very, very helpful.
And don't get me wrong, you can get away with one being sort of undermined more than the other. But you won't necessarily in the long term over decades be served well by that.
So in terms of sort of cardio fitness,
yes.
What does that do for the body? What does that bring in terms of performance and health benefits?
Well, I mean, in terms of doing aerobic activity, what that will do is it will increase mitochondrial density in the muscles. So think about that like cylinders in an engine. So the more mitochondrial density that you have, the more you can exert yourself comfortably for a longer period of time, the more that your basal metabolic rate will go up, the sort of more resilient your muscles are. So that's sort of the importance of aerobic activity. And the more that aerobic activity can be on varying terrain, the better. One of the interesting things about people's obsession with what do the Kenyans do, all the ones that live in Iten and the training that they do, and they do this long run and they do lots of running where they run slowly. Actually, the most interesting thing about that long run that they do, which is considered sort of the cornerstone of what they do, is everybody looks at it from a physiological perspective, but the reality is when you read up on how and where they run, they're running on dirt, they're running on gravel roads, they're running on camber, they're running on an off camber, they're running over roots and rocks, they're running on grassy surfaces, they're running at altitude, they're going uphill, they're going downhill. And so all of that variety is creating different neurological response patterns in foot placement, in reaction times, in muscle contraction, in force production, in force attenuation. And that's brilliant from a resilience perspective. So when people talk to me about what's the most important thing to do, if you're interested in doing half Ironmans and Ironmans, hands down, pretty much the number one thing is a long trail run in my book.
Yes.
Nailed it. I'm so happy. That's brilliant.
More.
That's made my day.
And I think from a psychological point of view as well, if you're totally starting out on a running journey, going on a trail run in an interesting place is psychologically an easier thing to do than the idea of just bearing down a highway or a footpath for however many hours.
And I can't stress enough that, sometimes using these Garmin devices is probably the best thing if you start to understand this ability to talk, is to stick that thing in your pocket. Because I've actually seen evidence now of people with running injuries that are due to wearing a Garmin, where they're getting sort of thoracic discomfort. So sort of lower back discomfort, and it's because if they're wearing their watch on their left arm, when they're running, that left arm is not swinging naturally in relation to the knees, but rather it's being driven sort of rotationally across the front of the body, so that almost every stride or every other stride they're glancing at the watch. Oh, am I at the same pace? Or am I at the same heart rate? And I've evidential experience of this working with runners, where I've had people say, I've got a bit of tightness in my back, and I watch them run around an athletics track, and then I say, take the Garmin off and now go and do the intervals that you wanted to do, and I'm going to be blowing a whistle so you know when to stop and when to start, so just run. And they finish the session, they're like, oh, my back doesn't hurt. I'm like, oh, really?
That's insane. A tiny little watch causing all of that pain. Mental.
Yeah. Best thing, if you're one of those people that wears a chest strap for the heart rate, that that's what you want to do, you want to get that data, then listen to your body, put the watch in your pocket and listen to your body, listen to your ability to talk, and just get on with it. Don't just let your body move naturally. A lot of how we move when we're walking briskly and when we're running is reactive. We don't actively pick our leg up off the ground using our hamstring. That's a reactive action. We don't actively place our foot forward. It's more that when our knee drives up, the shin and the foot whip through reactively. So let those things happen naturally. Arm carriage, that happens in synchronicity with knee drive. So let that happen naturally rather than interfere with that.
So going on to probably my favorite topic, because I'm a little bit obsessed with this, but strength training.
Yes.
How important do you think strength training is for the individual as they get older, as they try and go on an endurance sports journey and they try and prevent injury?
I think it's more and more important as we get older. I think when you're younger, you're a bit more bulletproof and you think you can get away with things. And I think certainly as well with elite athletes, what I tend to find I use is this phrase of they have an engine that can out-torque the chassis. And so that's why it's even more important to do sort of multi-plane, multi-muscle, exercises from a strength and conditioning perspective. And the reality is, for most people, if they're doing some strength exercises for sort of 20 minutes 3 times a week, you're not gonna get bulky and get big muscles. If that was a concern from an elite athlete, endurance athlete, I mean, if I could make somebody muscly from 3 times 20 minutes a week, I'd be driving a couple of Lamborghinis and living in a $4 million house, and I'm not. So yeah, that's the reality.
I have a question about that because I mean, I do strength training 1 or 2 times a week. I'm supposed to do 3, I just do 2. But I've been a dedicated yoga practitioner since 2017. I've got an amazing yoga instructor out here. And during the last 2 years since I've been running, I've had 0 injuries compared to JB's 3 or 4 million over the last 2 years. So do you think the fact that I've been a practitioner of yoga for so many years has helped with my resilience and my apparent indestructibility?
It depends.
Okay.
I think vinyasa flow is as a style of yoga is a great thing to do for endurance athletes because it's dynamic rather than static. Running and cycling and swimming are not happening at the end ranges of expression of power and movement, like speed skating as an example. So flexibility is not necessarily as important, but dynamic stability is. And so that's where something like vinyasa flow can be very helpful. So, when people talk about core strength, they forget that really what you're talking about is trunk stability. And when you're swimming and you're biking and you're running, all of those movements are expressed from the pelvis as a stable base and use the spine as a rotational axis to enable that expression of force. And so when you look at the amount of muscles that attach to that area, it's like 60 plus. So exercises that are multi-plane, multi-muscle, as opposed to single plane, single muscle, are I'd be doing the former rather than the latter every day of the week.
If someone is adding sort of supplementary strength and conditioning, yoga, some weight work, some body weight work into their routine on a weekly basis, how much is enough? And does everybody have to add load, or can people just be using body weight?
I think you can use body weight. I mean, you try doing the number of press ups that you are years of age on a daily basis every day, and you'll soon find that you find gains in strength. I think some body weight movements are good to do. Walking lunges are a good example of a body weight exercise. You can add stability to that with sort of rotations, at the mid lunge or at the end of the lunge, depending on the style of walking lunge that you do. And those are just simple examples.
So here's one big impossible question. What do you think the most important bit of advice you could give to somebody who's starting out is? If someone said, look, what's the most important thing you could tell me to do as a first step?
Is to start.
Yes.
Nice.
Great answer.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very easy to say. And I do this sincerely to people listening. It's very easy to say, just do something or find something that complements your circumstances or the stresses or the lack of logistical opportunities that you're under. Find something that can complement your circumstances, even if it seems as childish or ridiculous as it might seem. Just find something. And you don't. And secondly, you don't have to enjoy it. It doesn't to start out. You don't have to feel good to be good. That's something an Olympic athlete friend of mine said. It's, you don't have to feel good to be good. And so sometimes you're not going to feel like doing anything, and, just do something and worry about how you feel about it later.
I love that. Just do something.
Yeah, I love
I've got one more question I'd love to ask you, David, if that's okay. Endurance sports are really, really hard and super exhausting and a little bit mental. So why do we do them? And is there like a common thread that ties all of your endurance athletes together?
No, I don't think there's a common thread. I think it comes down to the expression of core beliefs. What is it? What is it you would sort of fight for and die for? What is the? And there might be positive and there may be negative reasons for that. There are athletes in my sport that what drives them is their faith. Their point of view is, I was given these talents by God, and it would be disrespectful to God to not express those talents to the best of my ability. That's one end of the spectrum. Other end of the spectrum is somebody that literally just wants to prove that they are not a recovered drug addict, that they're better than that.
I love that.
There's a mentality generally that some personality traits are negative and some are positive, and that we need to be intrinsically motivated versus extrinsically motivated. And the reality is that's not true. There are positive traits to narcissism. There are positive drivers that can be taken out of an extrinsic motivation to not be seen as a recovering drug addict. So it doesn't have to be this sort of, I'm intrinsically motivated, I'm sort of internal, I have this internal passion and desire to be the best version of myself, better than anybody else. Because the reality is when you look at some of these world-class Olympic medal winning athletes, a lot of the time they suffer huge amounts of, a lot of them, and I think it's actually a quality that makes them what they are, is they suffer huge amounts of anxiety and imposter syndrome all the time, because you simply cannot get better. When you've been on a podium in the Olympics with a gold medal around your neck and the national anthem playing, you cannot get better and come back to another Olympics and win another medal without an immense amount of self-doubt. Like, what could I do better? What small thing could I change? What would enhance this? What can I change in order to go faster or stronger? So there's this sort of racked with self-doubt that is also the bipolar other side of the coin of, I'm a complete rock star. And we seem to think that we need to feel like the rock star and be driven and passionate, and when in fact actually some of the negativity is just as important in driving us.
I think that goes back to the social media element at the start, isn't it? Which the social media world has convinced everybody you need to feel a certain way in order to be successful. You need to be like me. You need to be like, look at how good I am. Look, I get up at 4 a.m. and I do this exercise and I love it. And I never feel bad. Because in reality, feeling bad is part of the process.
Sometimes. Yeah, I mean, I had an athlete, and they've written about this in their blog post-race, but I had an athlete that was leading the race as a professional at an Ironman, rolled into the transition tent to put their running shoes on and start running the marathon, sat down, and for a moment was thinking, I think I'm going to DNF. I don't feel good. And they're leading the race, and then they started running, and then they realized, I don't need to feel good to be good.
But I think that's really nice for people like me to hear, because like there's this assumption, or certainly for me anyway, I would look at these Olympic athletes or these influencers on social media and think, I'm not that good. I'm just a regular person. I'm a normal person. I will never be able to achieve that level of health and fitness. So hearing you say that these elite athletes also suffer from anxiety and struggle with what they're capable of, it's so refreshing and nice to hear. Like, obviously it's bad for them, and it sucks for them.
Well, it's bad for anybody, but it's the reality of being purposeful and driven. You can't be purposeful and driven without a lack of confidence in achieving what you're trying to achieve, because that's kind of what drives you to be better. to lose weight, to be healthier. So, and I think a lot of it is also mindset. Is, do you have a professional mindset to being a better version of yourself, or being less reactive to stresses and emotions in your life, or do you not? I've seen really talented athletes have less professionalism and less stress management skills than 55-year-old housewives that don't work and have 3 kids to look after that are training for an Ironman. And so it's about mindset. Being an elite athlete is a mindset thing. Being elite minded is something that somebody can do that wants to lose 2 stone in weight, weighs 16 kilos, has a sedentary job, and is just realizing, because they've got young children, I want to be able to play in the garden with my kids when they're older and go for a run with them and cycle with them. It's a mindset thing. It's not I've got physical attributes that are going to make me great thing.
Nice.
Love it. So now we come to the final question of the chat, and probably the most important one is that we ask all our guests for a song to add to the playlist. And I know you sent me a list, but I can't make the choice for you.
I feel like it's going to be a good one.
It's got to be your choice. I feel like it's going to
be a really good one.
Oh yeah, that's a tough one. I think I'd have to go with Rage Against the Machine and Wake Up.
Good shout. Good shout. From the end of the Matrix, the first Matrix
Correct.
film.
It is a wicked tune.
A fantastic
It's a wicked tune,
song.
but I'm not going to lie, David. Genuinely thought you were going to pick a Disturbed.
No.
Just out of interest, what is your favourite Disturbed tune? Just out of interest.
I can't really pick one because they all tend to sort of blur into a ragey, like I'm driven to just destroy things and throw weights around and sprint hard on the bike kind of blur. So I can't necessarily pick one. There's a few songs that stick in my mind, but my music taste is quite eclectic. I've also got Vanessa May in my music collection,
nice.
The violinist. So I also have, this is really going back, Bronski Beat, and so that's going a long way back.
Yeah, because the playlist you sent me yesterday was pretty much my college listening selection. I think
There's a couple of rare ones.
It took me back.
Yeah.
So where do people look if they want to find out more about you and what you do?
Instagram, I'm at Tilbury-Davis, and same on Twitter. But it's all very much triathlon related content.
Which is no bad thing. Well, thanks very much for coming on. We really appreciate it. It's been a great chat.
My pleasure.
It's been
My
very
pleasure.
Enlightening.
It was great to talk to you. Thank you, David.
And keep up the drive to stay outdoors versus indoors training.
Absolutely, will do. Thanks, David.
No problem. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
So that was interesting. What did you think of the chat with David?
He's a fascinating guy, no?
He knows his stuff, doesn't he?
He knows his stuff.
And he's also, what I like about David is that he is very aware of his position in the sport and his position in the world with elite athletes, and how that doesn't transcend down to the amateur level. When you're talking about people who are just getting into sport or just on an amateur level, it's a very different conversation you're having.
What I've loved, like we've had 2 really cool guests on since we've started this podcast, which is pretty cool. And for both of them, I have felt quite nervous going into the Hike and a Chat with our 2 guests, because I was thinking, these guys are professional. Who am I? But David was super easy to talk to.
He put you at ease, eh?
Really, really. And he speaks to you. It's the way he speaks to you is genuine. He knows his stuff, and you really get the feeling that he loves what he does, and he wants to help you. He wants to help you be the best version of you without putting any pressure on you. We will put pressure on ourselves, but he wants to take that pressure off you. The pressure you put on yourself, he wants to take it off you and then help you be the best version of you that you can be.
There is no judgment.
No, that's it. That's exactly the right word. There's no judgment.
So should we go and find ourselves a coffee and talk about what we've done right or wrong this week?
I think we definitely need a cup of coffee. The weekly roast. Is that it?
So, I reckon, being that we're sitting in a nice cafe, you should take us through which coffee you've bought this week, because it's your turn.
It's my turn. And I'm back in the UK. I don't often come back to the UK. I used to come back to the UK quite a lot pre-COVID. These days, with Brexit, travelling's a bit of a ball ache. So I travel to the UK less. So, seeing as we were here for the Bristol Half Marathon, I decided we should go to this cafe and also bean emporium called the 2-Day Coffee Roasters, right in the middle of Bristol. Got some lovely beans right here. Not a sound effect. And I picked the Las Planadas from Colombia because the lady behind the counter said that they were kind of sweet, kind of honey, had
Like a
notes,
medium roast.
medium roast, but they have notes of honey and chocolate and caramel. And the second she said the word caramel, I was like, mate, whack in a big old bag of those for me.
Yeah, they do taste very nice.
They taste really good.
I'm sucking down an espresso as standard, and you're on the oat milk latte.
Oat milk latte as standard, and it's a cracking cup of coffee. So if you are in Bristol, or if you've done the Bristol Half Marathon and you need some coffee, go to the 2-Day Coffee Roasters, because they are a bean emporium, but they will serve you a nice cup of coffee while you're in there. It's definitely worth it.
Let's be honest.
So, let's be honest. What have you struggled with or done wrong this week?
Okay.
There isn't going to be much to this, is there? The depth of this conversation is going to be pretty... Basically, it's going to be you nailed it and I fucked it.
Yeah, that's the week in a nutshell. No, so it was a taper week, which was good. I love a taper week in training, or normally if I haven't got a race coming up, it will be a recovery week, because I tend to train in 4 or 5 week blocks. So I loved this week training wise because I had less to do. But then I was travelling all day Friday to get from France to the UK, and it's a long old travel day. And all day yesterday, which was Saturday, I was thinking, I don't feel like I've done enough for tomorrow. I'd set myself this arbitrary gotta get a sub 2 goal, and all day yesterday I was kind of feeling like I wasn't going to make it. This morning at the start line I was thinking, I wish I hadn't told people I wanted to do a sub 2, but then I fucking nailed it, so yay me.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure the audience has got much sympathy for your journey. Because they know full well that you've nailed what you said you were going to do. You felt a bit bad about maybe not nailing it, but you did it anyway, and now your partner in crime can't walk.
Yeah.
So what I did wrong this week was not listen to my body, because for the last 3 weeks I've had a bit of a niggle in my hip flexor, and it's felt a bit achy and it's felt a bit bad, and I have been saying, it's going to be okay, it'll be fine, I can run with it, but it just hurts when I walk. But 5k from the finish on this half marathon, it went ping, and it wasn't enough to stop me much. I almost fell over when it happened, but it wasn't enough to stop me running. I could compartmentalize the pain and put it to the back of my mind to finish the race. And then as soon as we sat down for half an hour at the end, I realised that it's quite a crippling injury, so I need to go and see a physio and see what the problem is and what I can do to fix this, because it's not very good. I don't think I've ever felt this bad injury-wise in my life.
Yeah, I was quite surprised to see the level of difficulty you were having walking when we after our little sit down.
Yeah, when those times when it feels bad, but you're laughing because it stops you crying.
Yeah.
And that was pretty much where I was at, and I was laughing. I was embarrassed by the fact that I was laughing, but I was only laughing because it was preventing me from tearing up.
Yeah, it was pretty bad. I was quite surprised to see you in so much pain. I mean, low key, ignoring it a little bit, flying high on my my PB win, but yeah, it's pretty severe. So I think what we've learnt this week is listen to your body. Turn it up.
That'll probably do it.
So we've had David Tilbury-Davis' addition to our playlist, which was Wake Up by Rage Against the Machine, Fist in the Air in the Land of Hypocrisy and all that. But it's your turn now. What are you adding to the playlist this week?
Well, I thought I'd go for something that's a little bit more kind of upbeat and light-hearted, to be honest, because I've had some heavy metal, I've had some old school prog, and we've got a bit of Rage Against the Machine, which is epic. So I am going for a tune called Real Good Feeling by Oh the Larceny. And I love that when it clicks on my playlist when I'm going for a long run, and they start singing about the real good feeling. I feel it. I feel that real good feeling, and it lightens my heart, and it puts a little bit of a spring in my step, and it's just fun.
It is a good song.
It's a really good song
by a good band, and if you're looking for a good training playlist, Oh the Larceny is a good Spotify Google.
Yeah.
Because they will they've got lots of tracks.
They pump you up,
yeah.
and they're just real feel good songs. And Real Good Feeling is one of my faves when it pops up on my playlist. Makes me happy. How about you, James Bale?
Well, I'm adding a track called Tell You Not to Worry by The Meltdown, which for a similar reason this week. It's got that kind of it's quite melodic, but it's got that kind of, when life is feeling a little bit heavy.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you just need someone to sing to you. You don't need to worry.
Okay.
It's going to be all right.
Nice.
And it's that kind of song. It's got a real uplifting but relaxed beat to it that just lets you go, it's all going to be all right.
Did that pop up on your playlist for the Bristol Half today?
No, it didn't, because I fucked it because I didn't have my phone with me, so I had to rely on the playlist I had loaded onto my watch, which was a random country playlist. And it was fine, but it wasn't enough. I didn't have that uplifting stir. I missed the Mohicans, basically.
You didn't have your Mohicans.
I didn't have my Mohicans.
I did have a bunch of Oh the Larceny on mine, which was nice.
Oh, well, I'm glad. Well done to you.
Yeah, which is probably what helped me get my all-time world record PB, just in case anyone missed it.
So it's been fun. We've had a chat. We've had Dave come on and give us some information. So I think we better say cheerio, eh?
We should probably say goodbye, let everybody else get to their Mondays.
Cheerio.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for hitting the trails with us this week. We'll meet you back here next Monday for more news, more views, more nature.
All the links for our socials are in the show notes. Find and follow us on Facebook, Insta, YouTube and Twitter. You can subscribe to our newsletter from our website for all the latest updates and camp plans. You get a fun free gift when you sign up.
Leave a review on your podcast app. It's really easy and really helps us out.
And if you've got any friends who could do with getting out in it, then bring them along to next week's outdoor adventure. We'd love to have you all with us.
Catch you next week. Cheerio.